The night I became homeless, I learned something important. People don't notice you when you disappear. Not really. They notice the drama, the shouting, the slammed doors. But once it's quiet, once you're actually gone, the world keeps moving like nothing happened. I was 17, and I had nowhere to go. My stepmother didn't yell when she kicked me out. That would have been easier. Instead, she stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded while I stuffed clothes into a backpack. "You're almost an adult," she said. Behind her, the kitchen clock ticked loudly on the wall. "You'll figure it out." I glanced toward the hallway where my father should have been standing. He wasn't there. He had left for work 30 minutes earlier, and he hadn't said a word. Not one. "Can I at least stay until he gets home?" I asked. She shook her head. "No." The front door opened. Cold evening air drifted into the house. "Go." I walked for almost 2 hours. At first I stayed on the road. Then I started cutting through fields and back trails I remembered from when I was younger. My name is Lily Carter, and that night I had exactly 3 things. A backpack, a phone with almost no battery, and $22. None of those things could buy a future. The town lights faded behind me as the road turned into dirt. Soon there were no houses, just fields and trees. I didn't have a plan, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go back. The forest started about 3 miles outside town. Tall pine trees rose along the edge of the valley like a wall. The dirt road curved around them before disappearing into the hills. I had walked that road once before with my dad when I was younger. Back then we had been looking for fishing spots along the river. But now the forest looked different. Darker, bigger, like it was swallowing the last bit of civilization behind me. I kept walking anyway, because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant realizing how alone I actually was. By the time the sun disappeared behind the hills, the temperature had dropped fast. My breath fogged in the air as I followed a narrow trail between the trees. I needed somewhere to sleep. Somewhere hidden. Somewhere dry. About 20 minutes later I found it. A fallen tree stretched across a small clearing, its massive roots pulled halfway out of the ground. The dirt underneath formed a small hollow. Not perfect, but sheltered. I crawled inside, pulled my jacket tight, and tried to sleep. The forest made sounds I didn't recognize. Branches creaking, animals moving through leaves, an owl calling somewhere above me. I barely slept. Morning came slowly. Cold sunlight slipped through the trees as I climbed out from beneath the fallen trunk. My back ached. My stomach growled. And the reality of the situation finally hit me. I was homeless, 17, and completely on my own. I started walking again, because sitting still wouldn't fix anything. The trail wound deeper into the forest than I expected. At one point it split into 2 narrow paths. I picked the one that sloped downhill. Water usually meant people, or at least fish. Either one would help. After about 30 minutes, the trees suddenly opened. And that's when I saw it. Rows. Long rows stretching across the valley floor. Trees. Hundreds of them. Peach trees. I stood at the edge of the clearing staring at the orchard. It was massive, at least several acres wide. But something about it felt strange. The trees were overgrown. Branches twisted in different directions. Grass had grown tall between the rows. No fences. No machinery. No workers. Just silence. Like the place had been forgotten. I walked slowly between the trees. The branches were heavy with leaves. Some of the peaches had already ripened and fallen to the ground. Others hung from the branches untouched. I reached up and picked one. It was warm from the sun. Juice ran down my fingers when I bit into it. It tasted like the first real meal I'd had in days. I ate 3 more before I stopped. Then I sat down beneath one of the trees and looked across the orchard. If no one owned this place, it might actually save me. Food, shade, cover, maybe even a place to sleep. For the first time since leaving home, I felt something close to hope. The deeper I walked into the orchard, the more unusual things became. Some of the trees had been pruned carefully. Others hadn't been touched in years. It looked like someone had started maintaining the orchard, then suddenly stopped. About halfway through the field, I noticed something else. A narrow dirt path leading toward a small hill at the edge of the property. Curious, I followed it. The path curved around the hill and disappeared behind a cluster of trees. And that's when I saw it. A small wooden building, hidden from the orchard, hidden from the road, almost completely covered in vines. It looked like an old storage shed, or maybe a cabin. I stepped closer carefully. The door hung slightly open. Inside was dark, but something told me this place wasn't as abandoned as the orchard looked. because sitting on the wooden table inside was a metal box, and it definitely hadn't been there very long. I stood in the doorway of the small wooden building, staring at the metal box on the table. The orchard behind me was silent. No wind, no birds, just the faint rustling of leaves. For a moment I wondered if someone was watching me. The place didn't look maintained, but the box didn't belong in a forgotten shed. It looked newer than everything else. Clean, almost untouched by dust. I stepped inside slowly. The wooden floor creaked under my boots. The shed smelled like old wood and dried fruit. Sunlight slipped through cracks in the walls, creating thin golden lines across the floor. The metal box sat in the center of the table. It was the size of a small toolbox. Gray steel, a simple latch on the front. No lock, which somehow made it even more mysterious. I hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were three things: a folded map, a small stack of cash, and a leather notebook. I blinked, because the money alone looked like more than I had seen in months. Carefully, I picked it up. $20 bills. Several of them. Maybe $300 total. My heart started racing. Okay, that's weird, I whispered. The map came next. It showed the valley, the forest roads, the small town I had walked away from the night before. And right in the center of the map, a red circle around the orchard. I slowly picked up the notebook. The leather felt worn, like it had been carried around for years. When I opened it, the first page had a name written neatly across the top: Samuel Whitaker. Below that was a sentence: "If you found this, then the orchard finally found you." I frowned. That's cryptic. I turned the page. The handwriting continued. This orchard used to feed half the valley. 40 acres of peaches. The sweetest fruit anyone around here had ever tasted. But things change. People move away. Business dries up. And sometimes you get old. I kept reading. Samuel Whitaker had owned the orchard for nearly 50 years. He and his wife had built it together from nothing, planting each tree by hand, harvesting fruit every summer, selling peaches to towns all across the region. But when his wife died, everything changed. Samuel wrote that he had tried to keep the orchard alive, but the work became too much for one man, and the younger generations didn't want it. So slowly the orchard faded, until one day he stopped maintaining it altogether. The next pages explained the metal box. Samuel had started leaving supplies there. Not for workers, not for buyers, but for people like me. Runaways, travelers, anyone who needed help. The orchard was far enough from town to stay quiet, but close enough that someone desperate might eventually find it. Samuel called it a second chance place. My throat tightened as I read the words. Because that's exactly what I needed. I kept turning pages. Samuel had written dozens of entries over the years. Notes about weather patterns, advice on pruning trees, instructions on harvesting peaches properly. He even left diagrams showing how to repair irrigation lines that ran beneath the orchard. This wasn't just a diary. It was a guide, a survival manual for the land around me. And then I reached the final page. The last entry was dated 3 years earlier. The handwriting was shakier, slower, but the message was clear. If you found this place, I hope it helps you the way it helped me. Take care of the orchard. And when you're strong enough, leave something behind for the next person who needs it. I closed the notebook slowly. For a long time I just stood there, listening to the quiet. The orchard outside stretched across the valley. Hundreds of peach trees swaying gently in the breeze. A forgotten place, but not a useless one. That night I slept inside the shed. It wasn't fancy, just a wooden bench and an old blanket I found in a corner. But it was warm and safe, for the first time since leaving home. I didn't feel completely lost. The next morning I started working. Samuel's notebook had detailed instructions on where to begin. Dead branches needed trimming. Grass needed clearing around the trees. And the irrigation pipes needed to be checked for leaks. At first the work felt impossible. There were hundreds of trees, maybe thousands. But I didn't have to fix everything at once. Just a little each day. So that's what I did. Days turned into weeks. The orchard slowly changed. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. I cleared pathways between the rows, removed dead limbs from several trees, even repaired a section of irrigation pipe using parts one found inside the shed. The first time water flowed through the system again, I actually laughed out loud. It felt like the orchard was waking up, like it had just been waiting for someone to care. The peaches kept ripening, more than I could ever eat by myself. So one afternoon I packed a backpack full of fruit and walked back toward town. At the edge of the farmer's market, I set up a small wooden crate. Fresh peaches. $3 a bag. They sold out in 20 minutes. A woman asked where they came from. I hesitated, then smiled. An old orchard outside the valley. That small crate turned into something bigger. The next week I brought 2 crates. Then 3. People loved the peaches. Sweet. Juicy. Better than anything from the grocery store. Slowly the orchard started feeding more than just me. But the real moment everything changed came in late autumn. A storm rolled through the valley faster than anyone expected. Heavy rain, cold winds, and temperatures dropping near freezing overnight. By evening the power had gone out across half the valley. Roads flooded. Cars stranded. Travelers stuck on the back roads. I was in the shed repairing a broken lantern when I heard shouting outside. A man stumbled into the orchard clearing. His jacket soaked from rain. His hands shaking. "Please, is someone here?" I ran out to meet him. "What happened?" "My truck slid off the road," he said, breathing hard. "I've been walking for hours." I helped him inside the shed and gave him one of Samuel's blankets. Then I lit the stove. The warmth filled the small room quickly. The man looked around, confused. "What is this place?" I glanced at the notebook on the table. "A second chance," I said. Word spread faster than I expected. A few weeks later, another traveler showed up during a storm. Then 2 hikers who had gotten lost in the hills. Each time I helped them the same way Samuel would have. Food, warmth, directions back to town. And each time I left something in the metal box. Cash, food, supplies. Because that's what Samuel asked. Leave something for the next person. By the following spring the orchard looked different. Healthier, cleaner, alive again. Peach blossoms covered the trees in soft pink flowers. And for the first time since Samuel had written that final entry, the orchard was thriving again. One evening I sat on the hill overlooking the valley. The sunset painted the orchard gold. Hundreds of trees stretching across the land. And the small shed standing quietly near the edge. I opened Samuel's notebook and added a new page. "My name is Lily Carter. I found this place when I had nowhere else to go. It saved me." I paused, then wrote one more line. "Now I'm saving it." The breeze moved gently through the peach trees below. And for the first time since the night I left home, I finally felt like I belonged somewhere.